Scientists working on climate change often rely on projections built from the best available knowledge and data. Yet, with so many unknowns, these models are never perfect. The ethical use of climate projections is not just about scientific accuracy, but about how the science shapes people's lives. It calls for honesty about uncertainty while ensuring that communities most affected have a voice in deciding how the data is applied. Decisions about our planet's future should be grounded not only in the best science, but also in the knowledge, priorities, and lived experiences of those on the front lines of climate change. By sharing both the data and the power to act on it, we can better balance uncertainty with the urgent need to protect our shared home. Scientists must also recognize the potential for model outputs to be misinterpreted, misused, or taken as fact, when in reality, all models are only representations of possible futures. Preventing harmful misuse means clearly stating the limitations and assumptions behind the data, avoiding statements of absolute certainty, ensuring that projections are not stripped of their context, and building safeguards so that they cannot be weaponized to justify inequitable policies or neglect vulnerable communities. The public's trust in climate science is important for disaster mitigation and response, but it can erode when models are inaccurate, when impacts exceed projections, or when the results are misused or miscommunicated, whether by underestimating impacts, overstating threats, or applying them without cultural, historical, and local context. When forecasts downplay the severity of storms, floods, or droughts, communities, especially Indigenous and historically marginalized groups already facing systemic neglect, may experience greater harm than anticipated, deepening distrust in both the science and the institutions using it. In some cases, models have been applied without incorporating local Indigenous knowledge, leading to mitigation strategies that disrupt cultural ties to the land or misdirect adaptation funding. These missteps fracture public trust, risk reinforcing historical patterns of exclusion, and can hinder effective climate governance. For climate forecasters, the challenge is to provide timely, actionable warnings while transparently acknowledging uncertainties and ensuring the modeling process is participatory, context aware, and accountable to those most affected. Addressing these risks isn't only about refining the science, it's also about how that science is communicated and acted upon in ways that protect rather than disadvantage vulnerable communities. Another ethical consideration is that the communication of climate projections must be done using a culturally competent approach and proactively avoid reinforcing existing inequities. Uncertain projections can have uneven consequences across communities, particularly those already vulnerable. For example, if flood forecasts underestimate future risks, resources may be allocated elsewhere, leaving the most at-risk communities unprotected when extreme events occur. Likewise, overestimating threats can cause unnecessary disruption or divert attention from equally pressing needs. In both cases, the consequences of miscommunication can deepen inequities and erode resilience. These divisions in how people can respond to climate change have created what is known as climate apartheid. Drawing parallels to the historical system of segregation in South Africa, the term highlights deep inequities in how different groups experience climate impact, especially when those impacts occur within longstanding systems of oppression that disproportionately harm vulnerable populations, including poor communities, women, and marginalized groups worldwide. Wealthier individuals and more developed countries often have the means to relocate or fortify their homes against climate threats, while those with fewer resources may lack such options. Even when climate models are accurate, they do not guarantee that everyone will have the capacity to respond equally. In closing, climate projections remain a vital tool for preparing for and responding to global change, but their value depends on public trust and how responsibly they're communicated and applied. Uncertainties must be made transparent, and the process must center the voices, priorities, and lived realities of those most affected, particularly Indigenous and historically marginalized communities. By pairing scientific rigor and cultural context, local Indigenous knowledge, community participation, and shared decision making, we can ensure climate data guides actions that protect communities and ecosystems. Planning for climate resilience today is not only about adaptation, it's about intergenerational climate justice, ensuring future generations inherit not just a livable planet, but a more equitable and inclusive one.